Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into one of the most famous holidays on the planet, trying to find the real story hiding underneath all that green. Okay, so every March 17th, right? The world just gets flooded with these super familiar symbols of celebration. You've got the huge parades, the kind that literally bring whole cities to a stop. Then you've got the shamrocks everywhere, their dying rivers break green, and of course, those leprechaun hats perched on like millions of heads. It's basically turned into this massive global party, a day where pretty much everyone celebrates this one specific idea of what it means to be Irish. But, at the very heart of all the celebration is this famous, almost foundational legend, right? The story that St. Patrick stood up on a hill and just drove all the snakes out of Ireland for good. Okay, let's just get right to the big reveal thanks to archaeology. Here's the thing. Ireland hasn't had any native snakes for at least 10,000 years. Yep, since the end of the last ice age. The island was just way too cold and isolated for them to ever make a comeback. So, if there were no snakes to begin with, what exactly was Patrick driving out? So, to really get this myth, we first have to picture the world that Patrick walked into. And let me tell you, it was not some empty land just waiting around for a new religion to show up. What we're talking about is this ancient Ireland that was just pulsating with a spirituality totally based on nature. It was a culture built on oral traditions and festivals that mark the seasons. And it was all guided by these really influential leaders called druids. And they weren't just one thing. They were priests, judges, poets, and the keepers of all this wisdom. And here's something really interesting. Well before Patrick even showed up on the scene, Christianity was already starting to take root. I mean, the historical record is pretty clear that as early as 431 CE, there were already organized Christian communities in Ireland. They probably got started through trade and contact with Roman Britain. So, yeah, Patrick wasn't exactly starting from scratch. Okay, so if the snakes weren't, actual literal snakes, then what in the world do they represent? This is where the story gets really fascinating. Well, if you look at it from a traditional, historical view, the snakes are a pretty clear metaphor in Christianity for evil, for sin. The whole legend becomes this simple story about Christianity winning out over paganism. But there's another take, a more modern one, from nature spiritualists, and it offers a much, much darker perspective. They argue that the snakes weren't a belief system at all. They were the people themselves, and that the legend actually represents the violent stamping out of their ancient ways, their connection to the earth. This idea, which is captured so powerfully in this quote, it just completely reframes the legend. It stops being a story about a miracle, and instead it becomes a story about a people whose beliefs, whose traditions, whose entire connection to the land was systematically ripped out and labeled as evil. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the man himself, because trust me, his real story is every bit as dramatic as the legend. First off, Patrick wasn't even Irish. Nope, he was a Roman Briton who got kidnapped by raiders and was enslaved in Ireland when he was just a teenager. Can you imagine? After he finally escaped, he trained as a cleric, and then he chose to come back. His own writings show this man who was deeply driven by his faith, but, over hundreds of years, this really complex historical person just kind of merged with the larger-than-life legend that we all know today. So that begs the question, right? How did a quiet little feast day for this one missionary morph into the massive global party we see every March? Well, the transformation didn't actually happen where you'd probably guess. The way this holiday evolved is just wild. For centuries back in Ireland, it was a pretty quiet religious thing. But the huge parades, the big public parties, this global celebration of being Irish, all of that started with the Irish diaspora over in America. They're the ones who transformed the day into this incredibly powerful symbol of their pride and their resilience in a brand new country. And hey, even that famous Shamrock story, it shows up way, way later. What's so crucial to understand here is that the number 3 was already a sacred number in pre-Christian Irish belief. So the shamrock probably worked as this really clever bridge, It blended a new Christian idea, the Trinity, with an ancient symbol that people already held sacred. So when you look at it all, the fact that this myth has lasted so long tells us it's about something way deeper than a simple miracle. It's really a story that reflects this huge cultural and spiritual shift. And, importantly, it's a story that was told from the point of view of the people who won that struggle. Ultimately, the story of St. Patrick and the snakes, it's all about power. It's about memory, and it's about who gets to decide which beliefs are considered sacred and which ones just get erased.
And it leaves us with this final, really important question to think about. When history gets written, whose truth is the one that gets remembered?